direct metaphor for how people have to play with meaning and play with words, especially like, so say, what would you create in order to pass along information when that information is deemed hostile or illegal to the status quo?
Yeah.
So you have to find ways to play around with language, to play around with different cultural manifestations in order for that language to seem innocent. But if you're initiated into the process of decoding that language, it becomes a subversive tool that allows people to understand the world in which they live so they can navigate the dangers in a safer way. So a lot of times people will come up with different forms of language, different forms of cultural expression that utilize ideas of knowing, but then to the initiated, it becomes a very subversive understanding of the world around you. So, yeah.
Huh, that's really fascinating. What made you like really like want to explore this like topic a bit more? Like
life experiences, stories that I grew up with, experiences of the people around me, and really just seeing how human beings operate in the world. You know, I feel like these things are intuitive to a lot of people, which means that a lot of people feel it and a lot of people navigate it with that understanding. And so I wanted to create a poetry based off of that, but not make it heavy-handed, but make it more of an experience so that when people encounter the work, they see the passion, they see the narrative, and then they also experience the imagination more so than anything else.
I see. Like almost tell, rather than immediately showing and expressing the ideas that you're portraying, you want to like sort of tell it through stories?
Well, see, so how the work operates is the same way as how the switchblades operate, right?
Yeah.
So in order to move in the world, you have to have a certain seduction about yourself. You have to have a certain charisma, a certain like what people call personality, right? And a lot of times that personality is just a surface level thing that allows a person to navigate the world around them. So my artwork does the same thing in that manner, to where there's a seduction because it's not heavy-handed, right? There's a seduction because it doesn't hit you over the head, but rather it allows you to enter into the conversation. You see what I'm saying? So you can look at it from an aesthetic level, from a purely visual level. You can look at it from a metaphorical level. You can look at it from a social level. You can look at it from just purely a storytelling level. And then you begin to see how all of these moments and all of these pieces interact and interplay to create this very buoyant object and this very buoyant thing that moves through different levels and operates on different points all at the same time.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. I guess one of the pieces that I guess I haven't really understood completely is the cow tongues, actually. Like when Paul and I were both talking about it, we both didn't really understand. What is the like true message that you're really?
There's no true message. But I think that ultimately with the tongues, I really wanted to capture the notion of language. What is language? What is language? Because that's, without the tongue, you're not able to speak. So what does that mean to speak? What does it mean to have your speech removed? What does it mean to be silenced? What does it mean to not be able to talk? Even this conversation is dependent solely upon our tongues. So if our tongues were removed, then that particular instrument of communication is robbed from you, right? So a lot of times I look at what I do as a means of what's the vehicle that is used in order to communicate, and the multiple ways in which those vehicles are utilized, and then what does it mean within the absence? So you have presence and then you have absence all at the same time. So it's not about one particular truth, but it's more about how questions and how realities interact with each other.
Oh, that's very fascinating. So I guess in going off of like how you communicate, or how like the tongue is essentially necessary to communicate verbally at least. What are there any like? I'm trying to think of it, but like. When you and Paul were talking about displaying this exhibit here at Skyline, were there any like thoughts that you had on like messages and ideas that you wanted to portray to the youths here, or not youths but like the students here?
No. I really just wanted to bring a very impactful show, a show that gave a lot, a show that was an experience. I feel like that's the most generous thing that I can give towards anybody that wants to pursue the arts, that's interested in the arts, is to create something that is an experience, something that is memorable, that resonates with them, and to be honest as possible within that. I wasn't looking for a particular walkaway. I don't think that that's my aim at all, but my aim is to really to focus in and create an experience that allows the viewer's imagination and also their experiences to move through the pieces.
I see. Like almost to become like a sort of inspiration, so to say.
Or just to view, to look, to wonder, because I remember, when I see a powerful piece of work, it makes me imagine more. It makes me question things more.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's the real beauty and power of a show, of an exhibition of a particular piece of work, is that it has that potential to even open up the viewer's imagination to a different point.
Oh, I see. Yeah, and kind of provide an alternative perception of the world and express that.
Alternative or a deeper one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
Exactly. I know you were also working on a few workshops, and I think, did they actually go through yesterday, despite the power outage?
No, the power outage, they restored power in the middle of the workshop that was scheduled. So we have one that's scheduled March 5th between 11 to 2, and we're working on rescheduling the one that was canceled due to the power outage yesterday.
Oh, I see. Okay. And then, are there any, I was trying to look for some more details on the actual, workshops. What is it exactly that...
So the workshops will be an investigation. The workshops are called reflective mythologies. So basically what it is that the people that participate in the workshops will gain an understanding of archetypal structures within myth. They'll go through a series of personality mappings, and then they will recreate the portrait as a deity of their choice. So it's an interesting way to not only see yourself in a different light, but also a way to experience storytelling from a standpoint that puts you at the center of it.
Yeah. Wow, that's actually really interesting. So in these personality mappings, is it essentially getting students to understand who they are in order to portray themselves in their artwork? Is
that could be a benefit.
Yeah.
It's not the sole purpose. I feel like just to know, not to get off track, but myth is one of those things that allow people to understand themselves and their place within the world. So the more that people understand myth, I feel like the greater they also understand their own psychology. So in order to understand your own psychology means that you're also able to make better choices about how you move and navigate through the world around you. And so therefore, even if you don't utilize this information within quote unquote your artwork, hopefully hopefully you'll be able to utilize this information in just understanding yourself more. So that's, to me, that's the main purpose of these workshops, are kind of explorations into self. And then recreating your portrait more so as a manifestation of you seeing a higher sense of yourself and taking ownership of that.
Wow, that's really interesting and a bit heavy, like.
Well, it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, the exploration itself should not be light.
Yeah, no.
I think it takes a lot of work and serious commitments and a lifelong commitment. So.
Yeah, I would hope so. In creating these workshops, was there any like coordination with the? Would it be like supervisors, or did you entirely like have this idea?
Well, I coordinated with certain folks on the campus with the students. The Reflective Mythologies is a project that I've created and implemented throughout the country while working with various schools, and I find it to be a really revelatory project within that sense. So I wanted to bring a component of that to Skyline College.
Wow. Oh, that's really interesting. How many other colleges have you, or schools have you gone to? 5? Wow, that's still a lot. Especially like since you're coming from St. Louis, correct?
Yeah.
Wow. And then in going from St. Louis to California, was there like any not difficulties, but like how would you say? Like I know from Paul and what he's told me, you were not commuting, but flying like back and forth between St. Louis and San Francisco.
Yeah, I lived in San Francisco for 13 years. So I lived and worked in St. Louis and San Francisco. Studios in San Francisco. I have a studio in St. Louis. So I moved back and forth between both locations.
Oh, I see. Does that like in a way affect like the way that you create your art, or do you entirely separate the two and just?
I mean, your environment informs.
Yeah.
So no, there's no. I feel like there's influence on both ends, culturally, visually, even just the ideas that I utilize. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, I see. Interesting. I guess, what else do I have on my mind? Or questions, I mean. So, actually, let me take it back to the artwork and whatnot. But Paul and I were talking about the murals and how they would eventually be painted over. And he was kind of talking about how you had a certain way of interpreting that and like the almost beauty of like having a temporary piece. And would you like to talk about that?
Oh, the temporality of the murals?
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, it's kind of like a personal thing, a personal practice where knowing that these are going to not exist puts me in a greater sense of presence when I create the pieces, because I'm not worried about them being permanent. I'm not worried about them surviving anything. It's almost like you're giving yourself permission to just paint. So it gives me a greater sense of clarity within these particular components of the work, especially when I do installations like this. And then also too, it's a way for me to be extremely generous with the audience. So instead of viewing these works online where you don't get a full sense of the scale, a full sense of the work itself, it's kind of like my nod of appreciation to the people that actually come out to view the work, is that they get to see these kind of monumental pieces, and then after that it's gone. So within that, I feel like there's a component of generosity that I believe that exists, and then also too in the actual making of the pieces, I feel like it allows me to be even more present when I'm making these pieces.
Oh. Like, be more present in the sense that you're entirely like realizing, or not entirely realizing, but you're sort of realizing that this is just a temporary piece, and that like I mean,
what happens when you hold on to something because you're afraid to lose it? Mm-hmm. Right? What happens when you do that? You tend to just hold on, and you don't move.
Oh, I see.
Right? So knowing that it is not going to exist after this, you automatically alleviate that fear. And so in moving through that fear automatically, you're able to move and you're able to express yourself, at least I am, in a greater capacity within the moment. So it's like for me, it's like removing the roadblocks. Because say if you approach this, or if I approach this and I thought that this was going to be the most precious thing that I've ever done, I would be terrified. Mm-hmm. Right? So in knowing that this isn't precious, it allows you to, at least for myself, I can only speak for myself, it allows me to work in a much more engaged capacity.
Wow, that's actually another interesting idea. Wow. Huh. I never really would have thought of it that way, because like, at least for me in the personal sense, when I like do my drawings, I always like, no matter how precious they are, at least like from my perspective, I always want to like safeguard that. But that's an interesting way of viewing artwork, and like how you should sort of like treat certain ways. But wow. I also noticed, like, Paul and I, we were talking about your sketchbook drawings, and how that was sort of a part of another like larger piece that you're working on.
Yeah, so the sketchbook drawings, these are concepts and conceptual sketches for a graphic novel that I'm working on that's related to the ideas that exist within this show. And so all of the components of this show are interwoven within this larger narrative that's being created.
Yeah. Wow. Did that take you a long time to kind of...
To conceptualize, and it still is. I mean, like it's a process of writing. It's a process of drawing. So for me, it's really about creating a balance between these two ways of getting at this larger thing that I'm creating. Yeah. So I write a lot, I draw a lot, paint a lot, in order to understand the world that I'm creating.
Yeah, that is a really interesting, like, so in a way you're sort of creating your own mythology, so to say. Exactly. And is that essentially why you're doing those workshops?
Exactly.
Interesting. That's really cool. Speaking of mythologies, is there like any like what's the main reasoning behind why you want to like work with this specific type of storytelling?
Well, I feel like, not to get too, but everything within our psyche is built off of archetypes. So if you look at narratives, how movies construct narratives, how corporations construct commercial narratives, how human beings even construct narratives about themselves.
Yeah.
There are archetypal components that allow human beings a deeper understanding of what those narratives are and how they actually operate within our consciousness. So for me, it's not about studying a story, but it's about studying human nature. So if you got like, so say you got like the trickster. The trickster archetype is looked at as multiple different components, and then there's these other influences that can either create a healthy relationship that one has to the trickster, or an unhealthy relationship that one has to the trickster. Or if you look at, like, say, these archetypes of the hero. How many movies have you seen that are centered around the hero? The hero's journey into self-discovery, the hero's journey into conquering the dragon, the hero's journey into conquering Darth Vader. Look at Star Wars. What are that's basically one of the oldest mythological arcs and archetypes that has been told throughout the human existence. Since human beings have been telling stories, there has been the hero's journey. So for me, it's this great wealth of knowledge and information that all human beings operate on.
Oh, yeah.
And the more that we're able to understand myth, the more that we're able to understand not only our place in the world, but also how other people operate in the world around us.
Yeah. That is pretty interesting now that you mention it. Like, despite how old these ways of telling a story are, they still apply in the current setting.
Look at the Avengers.
Yeah.
That's why people love Marvel Comics. That's why, because it's a pantheon, it's a mythology. All of the characters within them possess certain traits. Look at Loki. Loki is a Norse trickster god, right? His name has been resonating with people for thousands of years. Now he's showing up on the big screen and resonating with a whole entire generation. Thor, Odin, so these things aren't. These things are they resonate because they're important to the human psyche. And if they weren't important to the human psyche, then they would cease to be relevant to this particular present culture, right?
Yeah.
So that should at least lend an idea of, like, okay, let me look at this deeper. Let me study this a little more. Why does this form resonate?
Yeah.
Why does it take such hold? What is it serving? Not only in my life, in the way that I see the world, but in how the world actually operates.
Yeah.
Why do you? So it's all these things. Look at how Black Panther. Why was Black Panther so important? Right? Was it because it was a black superhero, or was it because it was this notion of this archetype being interjected into this larger pantheon of representation, or who is being represented and who is not being represented, and then also it creates this whole other branch of possibilities within this pantheon. So therefore you have all of these other archetypes and myths and stories that are now able to be moved into the story itself. So a lot of it is about possibilities, understanding the possibilities, and seeing how those possibilities operate within the human psyche.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's all I can say. Like, I'm at a loss for words at most of it.
No, but there's a lot of thought that goes into these, and a lot of understanding. But in particular with the workshop, I'm not trying to do a entire semester's worth of information, but more so an introduction, hopefully an engaging introduction that will spark interest for people to dig deeper within mythology.
Rethink and reanalyze. Wow. All right. I think that's about all the questions I have currently.
Okay.
But yeah, thank you very much for talking.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I really enjoy all your